Hey friends, welcome back to the Happy Homeowner podcast. You know, I believe that owning a home is the largest and most valuable asset we have, second to our time. As a veteran mortgage professional, investor, and outdoor enthusiast, my commitment is to bring you content each week that will fill each one of these buckets in your life. I want you to jump on board today. We got a great one for you, and we'll see you on the other side. Hey friends, welcome back. We have a very special treat today. I'm here with Connor Martinis, and we have the man, the myth, the legend, the GOAT of Puget Sound sport fishing, Juan Martinis here. Welcome to the studio for the first time, John.
Good to be here.
We're going to have a great time today. We're going to talk about shrimping. Puget Sound Shrimping is coming, the opener's coming up this week, May 25th, and I know Connor's got everything dialed in for you in regards to, we're going to talk dates, we're going to talk locations, and then we're going to get into the how, and this is going to be special. So, Connor, let's start real quick by dates, times, and then we'll get into locations.
Yeah, so Everett area, 8182, we do a lot of shrimping in this area. Unfortunately, we only have a couple days we get a shrimp at a year, and they're little short windows. Mm-hmm. So if we're going to plan to shrimp in these areas, you got to be well prepared and know the exact rules and when you can drop your pots. So 81 and 82 is opening this Thursday, which is May 25th. It's open from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., so you get 4 hours, a little short window to shrimp them. Another date is June 9th, which is going to be a couple weeks from now, same time frame. You have from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., 4-hour soaks. And then if we're down in Area 9, which is going to be south tip of Whidbey, south end of Whidbey and south, you're going to be shrimping only one day this year, which is May 25th, which is Thursday. So a little shorter windows there. You got to be prepared for, currents. We're not worried about the tide because we only have 4 hours to do it. So we're going to just, 9 a.m. hits, we're going to drop the pots and go from there.
Now, one thing that's nice is once you get all your gear set up, and it's a lot of work getting this stuff together, a common complaint is that the shrimp season is short, but not so fast because, yes, you only have 1 day in 9 and 2 days in Area 8-2 and 8-1, but then you go to Area 7 and you go to Area 6, and it really extends your shrimping. So, and they're going to be open a couple more days after Area 8-2 and 9 open. So, by boat, you can get out to Area 6 in about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes. You can get up to Iceberg Point up in the San Juans off the south end of Lopez in about an hour and 30 minutes, or, a lot faster if you're launching up a Deception. So take a look at the dates and plan around it so you can extend your shrimping. Shrimping's kind of nice this time of year because there's not a lot of stuff going on, and so you can kind of fill in your boating season, and this is kind of the beginning of it, with lots of shrimp dates.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so before we go into kind of diving deep into locations, Connor, in the comments or the description below, we'll have the May, the June, and the July I see here, Connor, for at least 7. And then same thing with Area 6. So that's a great point, John. So going back to the Area 81, 82, let's talk about Puget Sound locations, because I know, and even before we do this, you guys, John has done a great job over the years. In fact, I've given this book away. I have one on my boat, the Saltwater Fishing Journal. But you can find more info on locations and how-tos. But let's talk real quick about locations here in 8182, and then we can move up to the San Juans.
Yeah, all of these locations I took out from John's book, so they're all available. You can find them, exact coordinates and locations and where you want to be. There's lots of spots in the Puget Sound to shrimp. I'm just going to name a few of the more notorious spots where we've had success and, where a lot of the folks are going. I would say Hat Island is one of those areas where you can shrimp. They shrimp the southwest corner of Hat Island, or they'll fish on the northern west end of it. People do really well there. There's going to be a lot of shrimp pots there, so if you're cruising by there, you got to keep your eyes peeled and make sure you're not running into buoys. Great spot, though. Another great spot is you're just north of the Mukilteo Ferry.
Oh, yeah.
Another great spot. We get lots of good reports down there. I haven't personally shrimped that one, but I hear a lot of guys that come into my store that like that spot. Camano Head, south tip of Camano Island, guys do really well there too. You'll see a bunch of pots there. And then probably one of the places that I've been the most is just north of the Langley Marina. I've been shrimping there for 6-7 years now, and we do extraordinarily well there. And the nice part about shrimping in these locations, I mean, it doesn't help that it opens at 9, but it does, because we'll get there early and we'll kind of search for some shrimp. You can see them on your fish finder, so you get there early and you kind of troll around and you're almost looking for schools of shrimp to drop your pots in. Makes it a lot easier. You're not guessing. You know there's going to be shrimp in the area when you're hitting these spots.
So I know both of you guys have some tips for the San Juans. It's a little different. You know, you got to pay a little bit more attention to tides. You're on shelves, you know, protecting your gear, because that can be a $300 to $500 bill if you're not paying attention. So let's talk locations up in the San Juans, and then some additional tips about shrimping up there. Okay.
The main spot up in the San Juans is the south end of Lopez off Iceberg Point. Just an extraordinary place to shrimp. I've shrimped it. Well, I shrimp it every year, and you know, there's a lot of shrimp there. There's a lot of people there. When you get there, it's a oh my gosh moment when you see all the pots in the water and all the people. But the shrimping's really good. Now I'm going to give you a tip for there though. You're shrimping around the tides. I like to shrimp there an hour before high tide. Now, the tides don't always fit your schedule, but still, if you drop a pot when the tide's running hard off Iceberg, you're probably going to be chasing your gear or possibly lose it. So when you're going there, you need more weight in your pots, and you need one of the big polyform buoys so that if your pot floats, you can chase it down. But nevertheless, the shrimp in there is extraordinary. And then if you want to shrimp on the inside of the San Juan Islands, the Fisherman's Bay area is really good, kind of halfway between there and Friday Harbor. All of that area in there in 250 feet of water is excellent shrimping.
I was going to ask you, too, when you're out there, the south end of Lopez, Iceberg area, what depths are you guys in? 250
to 300.
Okay.
Closer to 300 than to 250.
Okay.
So when I set my pots there, this is a good tip. Every year the shrimp are at a slightly different depth. So you put your pots, one at 250, one at 275, one at 300, and one at 325. If you have to put them in a second time, you might be putting them all at one depth.
Got it.
Your first string's kind of a prospect string. So you're kind of just feeling it out, making sure, seeing what depths they're at. Then when you find that location, that's where you're really going to hit hard if you need more shrimp.
Love it.
If there's just two of you in the boat and you have 4 pots, you're probably going to get your limit the first go-around. But if you have 3 or 4 people in the boat, you know, it might take a little bit extra. But that's the fun of going out there.
Love it. Any other San Juan locations or even Area 6 locations you guys want to talk about?
Well, up in Area 6, you got Eastern Bank. Very, very good. And that's going to be on the east side. The tide runs hard there.
Okay.
So, once again, you're shrimping around the tide changes, and you're going to be shrimping in about 275 to 300. Dallas Bank is just absolutely a gigantic place. If you just go look for some boats, they shrimp a little closer to halfway between Discovery Island. I think it's Dungeness Spit. Just find 250 to 300 feet of water and put your pots in. Okay. No matter where you go there, you're going to catch shrimp. One spot will be better than the other, but you're going to catch your limit regardless of where you put your pots there.
And then the general rule of thumb out there, the same, about an hour before high tide. Yeah.
Yeah, anytime you're out in the Straits of Juan de Fuca or around the San Juans, you really have to watch the tides. On your more extreme tides, you're going to be shrimping closer to the tide change. Now, the tide change and when the water stops running are absolutely two different things. When the tide's coming in, the water will run for up to a half hour more than it does when the high tide or low tide spot. Now, when the tide's going out, the water's going to run in a westerly direction for up to an hour after low tide.
Okay.
So kind of plan on what you're doing. When I put a pot out, and I'm getting ready to put all my pots out, that first pot I put in, and I go look at the buoy, and I make sure the big polyform buoy is not halfway underwater, because if it is, I don't put the second, the third, and the fourth pot out, because you're going to be chasing pots around, and you're not going to catch any shrimp. If those pots move at all, you're going to catch nothing. And if they start moving after it's already been on the bottom, if it moves any at all, the shrimp are going to leave.
Got it. That's
so there's some good tips on doing this. This isn't as simple. This isn't like crabbing where you just go throw your pot in the water and you catch your whatever you're out there to catch at the end of the day. The shrimp come out to play. Remember, they're just a tiny little creature, and they come out to feed when the tide's not running very hard. Because if they're out coming out to feed when the tide's running hard, you can only imagine a creature that's 4 or 5 inches long gets swept away by the current. So they're not feeding at all times of the day.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Yeah, I've been blessed. I've been able to go out with some pros like you guys, and you guys make it look easy. And so these are some tips. These are the little things that the amateur, the average outdoorsman doesn't really pay attention to often. They come back and they're like, "How did you get all these shrimp?" Well, I kind of know what I'm doing. So John, that was great. Well, then let's transition now. You got locations. If you're not certain on locations, go and pick up John's Saltwater Fishing Guide and get you more information and coordinates. You do a great job in there. But let's put together, how do you rig a pot? How do you put this thing together so that, again, your pot's not getting carried away if you make a little mistake on tide? So let's set up a pot from start to finish.
Well, there's two varieties of pots. You have a fixed pot, which is going to be your metal cage with the coating around it. We have 3 different sizes. We carry SMI shrimp pots. Octagon one is 19027. So it's a great shrimp pot. Shrimp with those with John for many of years. They do excellent. You have the 19001, which is your round shrimp pot. And then you have the 19022, which is going to be your square shrimp pot. They're all relatively the same size. I would say the square one's definitely the smallest. It has a smaller bait container. So typically you're putting 1 9-inch bait barrel in that and then 1 on the outside.
Okay.
The round and the octagon, you're going to be able to squeeze 2 in there. So I know John likes to use 2 bait barrels in each 2 9-inchers and get as much bait in those pots as possible. They make a Ladner style pot as well, which is going to be kind of your softer mesh pot. They have 2 different sizes, a large and a small one. They work excellent. I've used them before. I've gotten shrimp in them. Ease of use wise, I think the fixed metal pots are easier. You don't have a bunch of hooks getting snagged on each other. They're not they don't take up quite as much room. They're excellent. Definitely like those.
So I know everyone wants to know this. John, what do you got rigged on your boat?
I use the SMI Octagon pot that Connor referenced. It's the medium.
Okay.
I add 15 pounds of weight. I think the pot itself weighs about 13, 14 pounds, and I add 15 pounds of weight. Okay. And when I'm going up into the San Juans or the Straits of Juan de Fuca, I also add a 1-pound anchor with 10 feet of rope, and I snap it to the bottom of the pot, and that helps anchor it in place. Now, I won't keep it in place under all conditions, but it sure helps.
Great.
Because the more stable that pot is on the bottom, the more shrimp you're going to catch. So if you want to pull your pots 8 times, just put lighter weight in. But if you want to pull your pots 1 time and have your limit, really load it up with weight and good bait.
I know you guys have taught me this too with crabbing. Do the same thing with crabbing. The more stable your pot is down there with the bait in it, the more crab are going to be attracting. You're not making it tougher for them to get. You're making it easier.
Yeah, you've got to remember you've got 400 feet of rope out with your buoys on the end. And there's lots of boat traffic anywhere there's shrimp, and especially out in the Straits of Juan de Fuca, it can be a little rough out there at times, especially in the mornings. And so that rope is pulling on your pot all the time. So that's what that additional rope's all about, because every time that rope pulls on your pot can walk a foot or 2.
Got it. All right. Okay, so we got the pots, we got the gold, the one that John uses. Okay, let's talk about terminal.
Typically, then we're going to go to a 4-point harness.
Okay.
Myself, I know John, we like to use stainless steel, especially out in the saltwater. Just lasts longer. You're going to get better use out of the deal. So from the 4-point harness, we'll go to our 400 feet of rope, and 5/16 and 1/4 inch works great. Leaded rope for sure. I like to use the 5/16. It bites in the pot puller a little nicer. It's going to pull it up better. Typically, we're going to rig these with a C-link on it, or you're going to run like a shackle. Typically, the shackle is going to go to the harness, something you can unscrew and screw, so you know it's a secure thing for sure. And then SMI makes these great little things called C-links, And it's just a quick, easy, fast way to slide your buoy set on, to slide your inflatable buoy on the end. Makes life a lot easier. Then you get up towards the buoys. We usually do 2 sections of buoys. We're going to have a foam section, which is your 9, 14. They make 3 different size buoys, but you're going to stack 2 of those on there. And the main thing for that is, like John was saying, it's going to help with floating your pot, or floating your rope and not jarring on your pot quite as much. And that's what the 400 feet of rope does as well. It gives you some extra line, some extra cushion. Mm-hmm. And we run those on a 10-foot lead. And then off of the other end of that, we're going to have our inflatable buoy. Polyform makes a great buoy. There's 2 of them. The A2 is going to be a round buoy. And then they make an LD2, which is going to be a little less drag on the buoy. It's kind of oblong shaped, and it's going to hold more air, so it'll float more weight.
Cool. So a couple of follow-up questions. So your tip, John, about having that 10-foot rope with an extra pound for additional weight, can they come see you guys at John's and get hooked up? You guys have all the gear there to help out with that?
We have all this stuff.
Certainly.
Perfect. So all the gear that we're talking about today, just come right down to John's. We've got it. You got plenty of pots, plenty of rope. Okay. Plenty of bait and gear, all that good stuff.
Lots of bait.
Cool. Something that makes shrimping a lot easier is having a good pot puller. So I know this is something I'm curious about. What do you guys recommend for pot pullers? And then do you have access to those 2 at the shop?
The 2 that we carry at the shop, we carry the Ace line hauler, which is wonderful because they make them to fit the Scotty downrigger mounts and the plugs.
Okay.
And they also make it for the Canon downriggers, the STX models, and their their Mag 5, I think it fits as well. It's got 2 different bases. There's an older style and a newer style.
Yep.
And then, of course, it'll have the same plugs. You can plug it right into your downrigger plug.
Okay.
That would be definitely my choice. I know that's what John uses. We've had great success with them. They're wonderful to use. They pull up a shrimp pot fairly easily. It pulls them up pretty quickly.
Cool.
The new ones have been really good compared to the first ones that came out on the Ace line haulers. They're very powerful. They're good. If you go out, shrimping half a dozen times a year and 6 times for crabbing, it's all you need.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to give you a good tip before you go out there in the Straits of Juan Islands and there's nobody around, nobody to call to help you if you have a problem, is put a 40 amp fuse in line, because if you put a 30 amp, you're going to blow that fuse. I've learned it the hard way. I had fuses with me, but since I've gone to 40 amp fuses, my problem's been over. When the tide's running really hard, sometimes that line's coming up at an angle, and there's a tremendous amount of pull. And if you have 100 shrimp on the bottom of that pot, or a bunch of shrimp, it causes a lot more drag because the water can't flow through the trap, and then you blow a fuse, and all the shrimp jump out of your pot while you're digging around for a 30 amp fuse when you should have had a 40.
That's a great tip, and yep, I can say I've been victim of that one or two times.
I think everybody's had that problem. Nothing worse than the pot being halfway up and you're looking for a fuse.
Yeah,
And cranking it up.
That's it. Okay, so we've got our pot put together. We are dialed in. Let's talk bait. Okay, I know you've got some bait containers or bait barrels. So let's talk about how to install that, and then we'll talk about. I know you guys have a special recipe that you want to share too.
This is what makes it all happen here. This is the fuel that makes it happen. You can make your life difficult, or you can spend a few extra bucks and make the bait really good. Now, you've spent $500 on one pot. If you think about it, that's $2,000 for 4 if you're really rigged up correctly. You might as well spend a couple extra bucks on the bait, because the bait is the cheapest part of the whole outfit. The last couple of years, I'm going to back up a little bit. You've seen my shrimp formula, and it works quite good if you've seen it online or you've seen it in our book, Saltwater Fishing Journal. The last couple of years, I found a lot more effective is I add twice as much mackerel as I used to. Less pellets, more mackerel, because the pellets, I found out, are absorbing too much of the moisture out of the mackerel. And so the mackerel, it's real thin, it's mushy, and it flows out of the bait barrels a lot faster. And it's kind of like a really, really cool fishing lure. It's bringing those shrimp right over to your pot, and just makes them want to go in there.
That's a huge tip. I didn't even know
I
that.
also sell frozen blocks of ground up mackerel that we use to add to our shrimp bait, and it's pretty phenomenal.
Okay.
That stuff works really good because it's very liquidy once it thaws out, and it's something you can really thin your formula down with. But go the extra mile. I start making my bait up 2 days ahead of time. Now here's what you do: you make your bait up, and then 24 hours after you started making it out, you add more fish oil to it to thin it out. Don't just mix it up and think it's going to be good for opening day, because by the time you get in your boat, it's going to be too thick.
You want to do a real quick overview of the recipe, and then what I'll do is I'll post the actual recipe in the description as well. Yeah.
So we got multiple different things you can add to your shrimp bait, and everybody has their own formula. This is the one that we've used, and it works great. And again, you're using this bait formula you're using to attract the shrimp. So you don't want it so thin where you drop it in there and everything disperses. It should last about an hour in those bait barrels. But you definitely want a good plume coming off your pot. I mean, you're going to bring in more shrimp with better formula. So like John was saying, we're using canned mackerel. We're using Friskies ocean whitefish tuna. We're using the prawn pellets. They make it in 22 pounds and 6 pounds. They're both the same. And then we're using the ProCure shrimp oil. And like I was saying before, the frozen mackerel is an awesome thing to add to the bait. Just adds another little flavor, thins it out a little bit for you. And another thing I really like doing, I've done this the last couple years, is any of my salmon scraps, I'll put on a bait pin in my shrimp pot, just so when they get inside the pot, they have kind of some meat to eat on, and it definitely holds them in the pot for as long as you need. Generally going to soak these for about an hour. After an hour soak, we'll start pulling our pots, and generally once you get into that routine, you're pretty much flowing through your pots until you got your limit.
The one thing you left out there, Connor, was Friskies ocean whitefish and tuna cat food, canned cat food. You mix that in. Another thing, it's real thin, so it kind of thins out your bait, and it disperses in the water right away. So you mix it in with all this other stuff. One thing you might want to try is, if you want to kind of go the extra mile, you don't need to do this, but I usually do it. I have one container of not real thick bait, but I just call it thick bait. And then I have a barrel of thin bait. And then I add some thick bait and some thin bait to my shrimp pot. And so you have some bait flowing out of the pot really fast. And then you have that other bait to keep the shrimp in once they get in there.
Well, I can tell you, I've just picked up 2 or 3 tips that I have not used in the past, just from our 30-minute conversation. So I love the extra tips. That's why you're here, and definitely appreciate you sharing some secrets and some tips that have just helped you be more successful on the water. As we wrap up, Connor and John, is there anything that we missed? Anything from locations to setups? I know maybe there's some questions that have come in, on the website before our show today. Is there anything we need to really hit home on before we wrap up?
I have one. If the tide's moving when you get out there, especially on opening day, is watch where the water's moving. So if you have a place you want your pot to land, these pots, remember, there's a lot of resistance when you throw that pot overboard. It's not going to land where you think it's going to land. Maybe go 100 yards upstream of the current and throw your pot in the water so it ends up where you want it to be. Because just sometimes in some of the places I go to, just 50 to 100 yards makes a lot of difference between pulling a shrimp pot up with 30 shrimp in it or pulling a shrimp pot up with 120 shrimp in it. Really makes a lot of difference. And you'll see these shrimp on your fish finder. And here's another good tip. If you're looking for shrimp on the bottom with your fish finder, don't have it set to look at the bottom from the surface, which is 0, down to 300 feet. Zoom in on the bottom. Have your fish finder set from 50 to whatever the bottom is. So it's just looking at the bottom 50 feet. And you'll see the bottom will look real mottled down there. There'll be a bunch of straight up and down lines. And those are shrimp on the bottom. And they can be as thick as 20 feet and as thick as 40 feet off the bottom. Remember, a lot of them are smaller than shrimp that are big enough to stay in the pots. But you'll see them. There's lots and lots of shrimp in these locations.
Well, these tips are why they call him the GOAT. That's why he's the best there is at this stuff. I know I asked you this before because I'm always curious when I talk to anglers, is there an app because I know tides and location and weather play a big role on our success. And I know you had shared with me an app that I've not heard of. What do you like to use most, John, for weather and for tides in regards to notifications?
There's one free app that I use called Wind Alert. It has the daily wind by the hour. You can pay for their upgrade service. It's not necessary, and it also gives you the tides. And so it's going to give you the weather a week out. Now, a week out around here isn't that reliable, as everybody knows. But of course, the tides are steady and stable. So you'll get all your information in one place. There's another app that a lot of anglers use called Windy. And that's another one. And so if you have one or the other, you're in the ball game.
I love it. Well, I know Connor and we're going to be out there on Thursday. We're going to be up in the San Juans. I am going to make a deal. I'm going to ask John a huge favor that if we can get enough positive reviews on this podcast, some shares, and some good traffic down at John's Sporting Goods here in the next week, we're going to invite him back to do a bubble podcast, how to fish the bubble and how to put more kings in your boat. You think we could talk him into doing that? Okay.
I think we can do that.
All right. Well, we need your help. So share this information. Today was super valuable for me. I always love learning from these guys. And I'm real big on supporting local. John has done so much for so many anglers. And same thing with Connor. You guys do such a great job helping us have more success and just have more fun in the outdoors. So do local business a favor. Come down, support John's. And these guys are a wealth of information. Reach out to them on Facebook, on Instagram. And we'll look forward to seeing you guys out on the water. But I want to say thank you both for coming in today.
Thanks, Dan.
All right. That's a wrap.